Welcome to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at Exodus chapter 7. So Moses and Aaron aren't exactly being held in high regard by the Israelites at this time. Nevertheless, they've committed to attempting to free the people from slavery by following the instruction of God. In this chapter, we'll see them confront Pharaoh again, and they'll end up bringing the first of 10 plagues on Egypt. However, Pharaoh's response will show that he's willingly choosing unbelief. It's an unbelief that springs from the desire to be in control, the desire to be number one, the desire to oppress other people and bring the nations to heel. And it's an unbelief that will end up bringing destruction for him and his family. Then the Lord said to Moses, "See, I make you as God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall speak to Pharaoh that he let the sons of Israel go out of his land." So this really wraps up the last chapter, elaborating on Moses and Aaron's roles and responsibilities when speaking to Pharaoh. Aaron will be like the prophet, speaking for God and announcing his movements. And Moses will be like God in Pharaoh's eyes, performing these mysterious miracles and judgments. This looks back to Genesis 1, how humanity had the vocation of being in the image of God, reflecting his attributes to creation. But it also looks ahead through Deuteronomy 18, the promise to send another prophet like Moses, and it looks ahead to Jesus, true divinity incarnate, the true image of God, as revealed to humanity's eyes. "But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that I may multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. When Pharaoh does not listen to you, then I will lay my hand on Egypt and bring out my hosts, my people, the sons of Israel, from the land of Egypt by great judgments. The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I stretch out my hand on Egypt and bring out the sons of Israel from their midst." So Moses and Aaron did it. As the Lord commanded them, thus they did. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. These verses go to show us that we should make no mistake, God is in complete control here. He's pulling all the strings. They won't really be Aaron's words. They won't really be Moses' miracles. They're going to be God's. And he's doing all of this to honor his covenant, to redeem the Israelites, and to bring glory to his name. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "When Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, 'Work a miracle,' then you shall say to Aaron, 'Take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh, that it may become a serpent.'" So Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh, and thus they did just as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron threw his staff down before Pharaoh and his servants, and it became a serpent. God instructs Moses and Aaron to use that sign of the serpent staff from chapter 4 to warn Pharaoh of God's power. As we saw in chapter 4, this shows that God is in complete sovereign control over death and destruction and will judge and punish sin and hold it accountable. And like a staff, this sign shows that God's people can lean on that promise and use it as a support whenever they're facing suffering and injustice. Then Pharaoh also called for the wise men and the sorcerers, and they also, the magicians of Egypt, did the same with their secret arts. For each one threw down his staff, and they turned into serpents. Remarkably though, this sign doesn't work. Pharaoh's own sorcerers and magicians are able to do the same sign. And it is a little off-putting, right? Symbolically, it represents how the powers of death and destruction are not just going to lay back and be content to be destroyed by God. Literally, it makes us question, is God really more powerful than the forces of sin and death? But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Yet Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had said. Resolution is found in that Aaron's snake really does overcome and swallow the other snakes, showing that God really is more powerful than the forces of death and destruction. But it's not enough to convince Pharaoh. And we hear that he hardens his heart. It's an idiom meaning that even though he has seen a sign that should affect him and change his behavior, he willingly chooses unbelief in God and in the sign. And he does not listen to Moses and Aaron as a result. Then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is stubborn. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is going out to the water, and station yourself to meet him on the bank of the Nile. And you shall take in your hand the staff that was turned into a serpent. You shall say to him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to you, saying, Let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. But behold, you have not listened until now. And so God instructs Moses and Aaron to perform their first prophetic, miraculous judgment. And we have to remember that it's in direct response to Pharaoh's abuse of the Israelites and his refusal to let them go worship their God. They're going to go to the bank of the Nile, and we should be remembering the power God gave to Moses back in chapter 4. Thus says the Lord, By this you shall know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will strike the water that is in the Nile with the staff that is in my hand, and it will be turned to blood. The fish that are in the Nile will die, and the Nile will become foul, and the Egyptians will find difficulty in drinking water from the Nile. Then the Lord said to Moses, Say to Aaron, Take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over their rivers, over their streams, and over their pools, and over all the reservoirs of water, that they may become blood. And there will be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone. To show that the Lord is God, that he's powerful and sovereign, and that Pharaoh should listen to him when he says to let the people go, Moses and Aaron announced that the Nile River will turn into blood, the first of 10 plagues that are going to come to Egypt. It mocks the Egyptian god Hapi, who they believe gave them the Nile as a blessing. And it being turned into blood represents the death and destruction that's going to come to Egypt because of all the blood they shed against the Israelites. It'll make the fish die, it'll make the water undrinkable, and it's even going to affect the water that's already been stored in containers. So Moses and Aaron did even as the Lord had commanded, and he lifted up the staff and struck the water that was in the Nile, in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants. And all the water that was in the Nile was turned to blood. The fish that were in the Nile died. The Nile became foul, so that the Egyptians could not drink water from the Nile. And the blood was through all the land of Egypt. And it happens just like God said it would. This should prove the power of Israel's God to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians. Surely this will make him let them go. But the magicians of Egypt did the same with their secret arts. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had said. Then Pharaoh turned and went into his house with no concern, even for this. Just like the serpents, the magicians of Egypt are able to replicate turning the Nile into blood. And as a result, Pharaoh again hardens his heart, willfully choosing unbelief and disobedience. He feels nothing at this awe-inspiring sign. So all the Egyptians dug around the Nile for water to drink, for they could not drink the water of the Nile. 7 days passed after the Lord had struck the Nile. And meanwhile, Pharaoh's people feel the consequences. The Egyptians have to find other water sources for the next week. The cycle of 7 days reminds us of creation back in Genesis 1, and judgment reminds us of the flood in Genesis 7. We get the image that because God created and sustains the universe, he also has the ability to remove his hand that's keeping it all in order. That causes destruction to fall and judgment to come on people who are abusive and oppressive. So over the course of this chapter, we see that Moses and Aaron are in it for the long haul. They are obedient to God's words. However, it's not going to be easy. The forces of tyranny, death, destruction, oppression, and injustice, sin, is going to fight back. And as a result, Pharaoh stays committed to these powers of tyranny, death, and destruction. And that's what it means that he's hardened his heart. But God is going to continue to work, and he's going to keep his promises to his covenant partners. It's an encouragement for us today to remain committed to God's promises, even in the face of suffering and injustice. Thanks for watching 1189. I hope you have a good day, and God bless.